All right, welcome to the inDEPth podcast, Black Male Achievement Podcast. Today we have Mr. Damon Cobble. Damon Cobble is of the Minority Mental Health Project, and he's also a mental health practitioner at Western Middle School. The Minority Mental Health Project is a threefold initiative aimed to address affordability, cultural responsibility, and accessibility by increasing awareness, culturally responsive interventions, and preventative measures. So, Damon, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to create the Minority Mental Health Project. And I do want to start out by saying that I have attended one of your events. It was very powerful. It made me become very introspective. It made me buy the book by Jason Wilson, Cry Like a Man. A lot of stuff that I just thought was normal for being a black man. By coming to the event, I realized it shouldn't be normalized. So just tell us a little bit about your journey to being where you are today and what was the thought process behind creating the Minority Mental Health Project.
Hey, I appreciate Mr. Van for allowing me to, to engage in this platform. It's such a very important conversation. Kind of the backstory of Damon Cobble is I'm from Louisville. I grew up in the projects, Lane Homes, Southwick, back in the 70s and 80s, a single family household. My mother was a victim of domestic violence. My mother, we struggled socioeconomically. In some of those factors, along with my academic journey of not being able to read or write coming out of high school, were factors that motivated me to address some personal issues that I felt like were barriers to me being a better father, a better son, and a better role model. And so those are some of the factors that's kind of shaped me and kind of led me to creating the Minority Mental Health Project. And more specifically, the Minority Mental Health Project was created to address the gaps in the research when it comes to underserved communities receiving therapeutic services. And there are many systemic barriers to African Americans receiving therapeutic services, but more specifically, what I identified were accessibility, affordability, and cultural responsibility. There's not too many of us representing our culture within the world of psychology. From my knowledge, African American men make up, I believe, 1% of the psychology workforce in the U.S. I believe minorities make up 4% of the psychology workforce in the U.S. And so once I was able to overcome my own personal obstacles and struggles, I kind of felt like I had an obligation to at least bring back some of these skill sets that I've been so blessed to have and being able to overcome to bring back to the community and create an organization that will address these gaps in the research to with our underserved communities.
So you being a black man and you going through the things that you went through growing up, we talk about domestic violence, struggling financially. Was it hard for you to open up to address, like, what was the process like to open up to address your own mental health? Um, I don't know the right term. I don't want to say issues, but your own mental health challenges. What was that process like for you?
Well, it's very challenging, being, having the fortitude or trying to find that internal strength to really, face your own demons was a very big challenge for me personally. But I had to because I have children. I have three beautiful children. And, I wanted to set a better example for them, or be a better father, be a better role model for them. Now, I'm not perfect, I continue to make mistakes, but during those processes, I decided to seek out the help myself so I can become a better role model, not only to my children, but to the young black men in the West End or the underserved communities who may be struggling to open up about their internal issues.
A lot of people, like the past couple of years, it's a lot of people that are starting to address mental health in the black community. And a thing I hear all the time is or mental health is taboo in the black community. Is that a true statement? And or is it a myth? And if it is true, why do you believe it's true?
Well, I think is it a it's you got to look at the historical context. So even though there's much research on risk factors, there's much research on at-risk behaviors, there's much research on mental maladies, of all kinds within the underserved communities, but experts have not given enough time and attention to the issues of the mental health issue within the Black community, and the stigma often experienced by Blacks who even acknowledge having mental health issues. So yes, I believe there is a stigma. There's a lot of myths, myths that need to be dispelled. But I think more attention from the science community, from the researchers, needs to be given more to the specific issue when it comes to at-risk behaviors, risk factors with Black community.
With you working in a middle school, with the mental health challenges that you approach or that you see every day, what do you think are the most common things that you see amongst Black youth, in particular Black males?
Well, I think it's more so them conforming to the narrative that has been created for them. Not enough attention is focused on reinforcing their competencies, their positive skill sets that they do have. I think the lack of father being in the home is a definitely a barrier to the development of young Black men. So I think there's a lot of effects, a lot of factors that play a role into that. But most important, what I see a lot of young Black males within the school system that are just conforming to not only the narrative, but they're seeking out that love and attention that should be provided within the household that they reside.
Okay. We just had Lyndon Pryor from the Louisville Urban League to join us, so he may pop in with a question at some point. Of course, we have a lot of stuff that's going on in the media and in the world today, and a lot of our way of taking that stuff in is from social media. Me, especially for this past week, before I go to sleep, it's hard to put my phone down because it's like I'm still scrolling, trying to see what's going on in Louisville, around the world. So, what do you think the effects of the social media that it's having on Black youth today?
Social media can have many effects on our children, adolescents specifically. It can affect their self-view and their interpersonal relationships through social comparison and negative interaction, including cyberbullying. And moreover, social media content often involves normalization and even promotion of self-harm and suicidality among youth. So high proportions of youth are engaged very heavily in smartphone usage and multimedia multitasking with is causing adverse effects such as sleep deprivation, negative effects on their cognitive control, and also their academic performance and socio-emotional functioning.
So, if there was a parent, what kind of advice do you give to us parents who have kids that like to scroll social media? Because I saw like an article saying how social media is contributing to depression a lot in young people because they're comparing their lives, and I think it's adults too, comparing their lives to what they see in others. So, do you believe parents shouldn't allow social media before a certain age? Do you think there's a certain time limit? Like, what kind of advice would you give to parents on monitoring their children's social media intake?
Well, not only as parents, but also as clinicians, as a professional clinician, we can work collaboratively, with the youth and their families using open, non-judgmental, developmental appropriate approaches to reduce the potential harms of social media and smartphone usage. Including education and practical problem solving. There's a need for also more public awareness, which I know the JCPS is doing a great job of this. There's more need of more public awareness and social policy initiatives that promote nurturing and also nurturing at home and in school environments. And these behaviors, these relational behaviors, of course, they foster resilience in our youth to navigate the challenges that they're facing every day.
One of the things, you have a lot of people are protesting at this time for Black lives. We've seen time and time again over the years Black lives being taken on cell phone footage, and we see it constantly over and over and over online. Mike said that we watch it like murder porn. We see it all the time, and it's like we can't put our phone down.
Yeah.
So what are the effects do you think that seeing that not only of our youth, but just people in general, of seeing people that look like them, their lives taken by the people that are supposed to protect them?
Man, that's a good question, man. It's hard. I've been engaged in the protests quite a few days, and let me tell you, there are some definitely, and more to be more specific, let's look at police brutality, right? There are some correlations. Research has found some correlations or intersecting pathways when it comes to between police brutality and the poor health outcomes of Blacks. One is the fatal injury. It increases the population specific mortality rate, adverse psychological responses. It increases more morbidity, and also the racist public reaction can cause stress. And not only that, you have the arrest, incarceration, and other legal, medical, and also even funeral bills that are associated with those violent behaviors. They cause financial strain on our families. And lastly, you got to also take into consideration the oppressive structures that cause systemic disempowerment as well.
Yeah, one of the big things that and I hear people, like I heard a guy on the radio yesterday, he's a white guy, and he was talking about, if you look at stats matter. If you look at the numbers, white people are killed by police as well. And the fact that to me it's diminished what our challenges are when we interact with law enforcement. Of course, not all law enforcement, but with a lot of law enforcement, it feels like it's being diminished. And it's like, well, we had the same struggle. But the thing is, if you were to ask, 10 Black guys on the street and 10 white guys on the street, the eye test, it'll show you that we don't have the same struggle, because me and all my friends have been harassed by law enforcement on multiple occasions, and it's not the same for a lot of white America. And I think that this right here is this situation is bringing attention to that, and people are saying, like, I just literally did not know that that's what y'all were going through. And my opinion is that a lot of this is on public education system, JCPS, along with other school districts. We're not doing enough to teach the true history of Black America and what challenges we've had with law enforcement and policy in general over the years. So I think that that's just something that we have to do a better job of educating, not just Black children. We have to educate all children so that everyone is aware of the challenges and struggles that we face. One of the things that I was very, very interested in when I came to the event of yours that I came to was the idea behind vicarious trauma. And so if you could explain vicarious trauma, what it is, so then we could talk about that a little bit.
Vicarious trauma and how Black people experience it. A vicarious trauma, pretty much, it kind of goes as interchangeable with also the term secondary trauma. And so those terms are interchangeable and are frequently used interchangeably to refer to the indirect trauma that can occur when someone is exposed to a difficult or disturbing image or story of secondhand, right? So whether you call it a secondary trauma or vicarious trauma, what we are referring to as clinicians is the impact of the impact of indirect exposure to that experience, to that difficult, disturbing, or traumatic image and stories of the suffering of others. So over time, the repeated exposure to difficult content can definitely cause a generational trauma, historic trauma, which is an example of intergenerational trauma. And so you got to look at the history, not only systemically within our own city, within our own state, but you got to look at the history of the United States, of our country. And trauma started, the physical aggression started with them, not us. And so it is ingrained in the fabric of our country. So we have been experiencing this trauma, vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, even direct trauma for generations. So I find it impossible for any institution or anyone to address trauma individually without addressing the system that is reinforcing that trauma. For an example, it is impossible for a parent who is not regulated, to help regulate their child when they're not regulated themselves. So if the system is dysregulated, it's definitely going to have a generational historic context on the Black family like it already has. So systemically, we need to look at the systems, in terms of equality and regulating the systems through policy in order for us to be regulated as a people, individually, and as a family.
Yeah, and I just said that our experiences are real. When we
Yeah.
see constantly online Black people being beaten or a shot for just for being Black, or reaching for their license, but somebody assumes that they're reaching for a gun. When you see that on TV, you can't help but when you see those blue lights flash behind you to feel anxious, feel anxiety. I literally ride down the street and I'm thinking if I get pulled over, the way I'm going to handle it. I don't keep my license or registration in my glove compartment like some people do because I'm cognizant that there's people who look like me who when they do that, it's assumed that they're reaching for something other than their license and registration. I'll never forget being at the event that I attended with you. The guy asked about vicarious trauma because we had anyone listen to this from outside of Louisville. We had an event in Louisville of a man being shot and killed in a local Kroger. And the guy asked, when I walk in Kroger now, and I'm nervous every time I go, is that a form of vicarious trauma? And the panel told him yes. And the thing that also was alarming to me, that the event that you had was at a church. And when we were at the church, it was an event that everybody knew was for the Minority Mental Health Project. So people knew that it was going to be Black people there. It was nighttime, and it was a church with just all Black people there. And I kept thinking, I looked at the exits and the entrances to the church, and I was thinking, if somebody comes in here and tries to shoot up the church, what I'm gonna do, and this is before the event even started, before I even knew anything that the panel was gonna talk about. I was thinking about how I'm gonna respond, and I remember thinking, if I do have to fight somebody, then I'm glad I'm with people who we are fighting for the same cause. But those things that we've seen, and of course, that's rooted out of a church being shot up in whether it's North Carolina or South Carolina. It's stuff that we've seen before, and I feel the same thing when I go to the movie theater. Thinking of somebody coming in and shooting up the movie theater. And I know those things in particular aren't necessarily only Black people's struggles, but it's definitely a struggle that we do have. So it's definitely a real thing for us. Um,
And if
just
I can chime in,
oh, yeah.
on that, and this is very important, and I can't put enough emphasis on this, and I'm sure you know this, and Mr. Pryor knows this, but our country has a history of subjecting Blacks to violent trauma experiences. So until our country decides to make a change, we are going to continue to be subjected to these micro and macro aggressions, whether it be through policy or whether it be directly. And that is one of the issues that a lot of clinicians struggle with when treating Black families. They fail to take into historical context. They fail to take in consideration the generational processing, the intergenerational trauma that is trickled down from generation to generation, maladaptive coping skills. They fail to take that into context behind closed doors. And this is one of the reasons why the Minority Mental Health Project exists. We want to push that. We want to challenge not only clinicians individually, but organizations, and look at policy. We have to start looking at this in the greater context and stop treating our families by putting a Band-Aid over what you see the external behaviors without digging deep and getting context and even treating their family from a contextual perspective standpoint.
Can you tell us what that maladaptive coping skills? Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, for an example, let me give you an example. Like you have a baby, and this may be a bad example, but I'm saying it anyway. If you have a baby that's born on crack, if the mother was on crack and the baby is born a crack baby, right? So that baby is born, on crack. And so that baby is going to have withdrawals or whatever. So that baby is going to have some maladaptive, some unhealthy coping skills as this baby is dealing with stress from birth. So that baby is going to have to be treated as they get older because they were born on crack. And it's also been proven through the human hormone cortisol that those maladaptive coping skills, whether it be anxiety, can be trickled down through the DNA. And so if you have a mother who suffers from high anxiety, who's never been treated. Science has proven that it can be trickled down through the genetics. And so the child can have those maladaptive coping skills because the mother didn't address them at an older age. So now it's trickled down through the DNA. And then so that's how that intergenerational trauma continues to trickle down from generation to generation.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I was reading some research behind that. I didn't know that that was a phrase, but I was reading some research behind that, and they talked about how a lot of times things in a normal family can follow that family for 3 to 4 generations after. So, like, if a man has anxiety or whatever challenge he may have, it can follow for 3 to 4 generations. But the thing about slavery, since it lasted for hundreds of years, they believe in Black families it can travel further than 3 to 4 generations because it was so embedded in the DNA of a lot of people. So a lot of the people that we're seeing now, like when people say that all these young Black boys have these behavioral disorders or these issues that they believe are challenging, a lot of this stuff is stuff that has been passed down for generation to generation. And so what does that look like? And I'm just off the top of my head. It may be that Black people were forced to work from sun up to sundown, or even maybe past sundown to do work. So maybe that's part of the reason why Black boys don't like to sit in a classroom. They like hands-on learning because they've never been throughout history. We weren't allowed to sit in a house in the air conditioning and just sit down and stay calm. Our family members and generations ago, they worked all day long, so it's hard for us to sit down and just listen to a lesson. So of course, that challenge needs to be on teachers to figure out how to channel that behavior into behavior that can be productive. But that's just part of the system that we're up against. So just to end us up, can you just let us know, like, any kind of advice you may have to parents for how they can take the mental health of their children, um, and you themselves as well, if you want to give that, but definitely for the students, for parents that may have students in JCPS.
Yeah, there some advice to parents in terms of when they're trying to protect their child's mental health. Talk to them, read to them, help them to understand basic words, spend time cuddling with them. Some of those basic needs, Maslow needs. Holding your baby, play with them, encourage a child to take part and pretend play. And let them make choices, let them make mistakes, and encourage your child. Talk to the school-age child about friends, understand who their circle is. Just kind of normalize every day these conversations, and really what you're doing, you're checking in on them, but you're also reinforcing their competencies, giving them some autonomy to go through life, while also being there available to catch them if they fall. So talk to your child about respecting others, encouraging them to talk about possible consequences before their actions. Stop and think. So just normalizing these conversations, can definitely help protect a child's mental health as they go through life stages of development.
Let me ask you this: as a future father of boys, I see sometimes in our families in particular, boys are looked at as weak if they cry. We contribute crying and showing emotion to weakness. Can you say anything about the possible dangers in that?
Yeah, what you're speaking of is the masculine role norm. And I grew up, in an environment that really reinforced that boys don't cry, boys are tough, don't be a sissy, don't be a wimp. But what that does, that teaches us to internalize and suppress almost our deepest feelings, right? And so when we are angry, or when we are upset, or we are mad, because we're taught that boys are supposed to be tough and supposed to hold themselves up to a certain standard. I use a balloon analogy. Our immune system is only designed to fight off one stress at a time, right? Just imagine if you're dealing with a common cold or a flu, your immune system is doing everything it can to get rid of that sickness, through bond regurgitating, through sweat, through fever, through other means. Your body, your immune system is doing everything it can to get that sickness out of you, right?
Right.
So compound that with the socioeconomic inequalities. Compound that with a teacher who doesn't understand my living conditions. You know, I'm worried about feeding my siblings when I get and go home. Compound that with the gang violence. Compound that with domestic violence. We are overwhelming our immune system. You know, we don't have the skill set, specifically our younger generation, they don't have the skill set to navigate all these adverse challenges. And that's where school counseling comes into play. That's where have an open dialogue with your children comes into play, giving them that outlet to externalize their true feelings. We may not agree with them, but we can validate their feelings. So giving them that out, you know, and giving them a safe net to talk to would definitely help regulate and help them to mitigate through these life challenges.
I don't know if you know the stats off the top of your head, but I know that there's been a large increase in suicide amongst Black youth in the past couple of years. Do you know the stats or anything behind that?
No, I don't know the specific data, but I know it has definitely increased over the past 4 years, specifically among Black males. And so that the suicide ideation, and I think it goes back to the conversation we just spoke of,
Right.
and just not being able to mitigate all of these life challenges through, you know, through life, you know, in terms of being able to address it. Plus, their brains are not really fully developed. And so what's happening is they created these pathways in their brains that where they are normalizing these negative behaviors or these unsafe behaviors. So these behaviors become normal to them. And so what we have to do is create some more healthy pathways in their brains while their brain is still developing, and giving them the skill set and the tools so they can navigate these life challenges. And that's by having an open conversation, a very honest conversation, you know, with what we're faced with as a culture and as Black people.
And I think a lot of what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, it just sounds like a lot of this is just communicating and allowing our child to communicate and talk to, like, express their feelings, which is something that I don't know about white men, but I know as Black men, a lot of us, we don't want to communicate. We don't want to open up. We don't want to share our true feelings. A lot of that comes from, like you said, when we were younger, we were pretty much taught and embedded that you shouldn't it's a sign of weakness to talk about the challenges that we're going through. And, you know, I don't know if I'm sure that if we trace it all the way back, I'm sure a lot of that has to do with slavery as well, because we had to wake up and go to work, and you couldn't, it didn't matter what was going on. You had to work no matter what you were feeling on the inside. So I know a lot of people think that Black people always bring up slavery, and that's years ago, y'all should get over it. But I really think from a scientific standpoint, from the stuff you're saying and the research you're saying, a lot of this stuff is still having effects on our generation and our families. So I appreciate you joining me today. Can you tell people in Louisville, like, if they wanted to get in touch or support the Minority Mental Health Project, or to find out any information from you guys, how they can go about doing that?
Yes, the Minority Mental Health Project will be launching our first infomercial actually Monday. And so if they want to volunteer, if they want to donate, or, you know, if they want to be a part of this initiative, they can go to www.mmhplou.com, and they can leave a message expressing their interest. So look forward to our delivery of service to start next week in terms of serving the community. And let me share this with you too, man. This is an organization, and I really didn't realize how unique this organization is. You know, it's a challenge, you know, trying to put something like this together. It's been a lot of barriers, a lot of challenges, but, you know, I have faith, and it has really come together in terms of our partners, in terms of the community cry for the need. And so we're an all Black organization. We are all Black board. We have all Black therapists. We have Black case managers. So, and then only that, we have a research component that is ran by an African-American male from the University of Louisville Diversity and Inclusion Department. So we're going to be running pilots where we're going to measure this and look at the effectiveness of the services that we're going to be providing over the next year. So we're only not going to just we're not just a ride-by organization. We're looking at sustainability. We're looking at long-term. We're looking at really addressing these gaps when it comes to the underserved and the Black community receiving therapeutic services. We want to remove those barriers out of the way.
Well, I believe in you, man. That's the reason I want to have you on because I didn't. The only reason I showed up at that event that you had was because of the title. It was called "What's Killing Black Men," and I didn't know any. I didn't even know what I was walking into, but it was powerful. And one last thing, you, I didn't know that I had things that I needed to address or I needed to work out until I came to the event. What if there's people out there that feel, because I felt like everything that I did feel was normal. All black men feel it. So what's the point? Like this is just part of our struggle. If there's somebody out there listening that's thinking like, I feel normal. I don't think I need any kind of therapy or any kind. I don't need to talk to anybody. What would you say to somebody that may feel like they feel okay on the inside? Why is it important to still go talk to a mental health professional? I guess to make sure. Maybe it's kind of like getting a tune-up when you take your car for a tune-up. Why do you think it's still important for people to seek out mental health?
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's important that we dispel this myth or whatever this untruth when it comes to receiving therapeutic services. Even growing up as a young black male in the western of Louisville, I've always understood receiving therapeutic services meant that I get dropped off, right, and I have to see whoever they assign me to. So
Right.
we need to educate our community, educate our families that they have a right to choose who they want to talk to. They don't have to settle for any specific therapist that is just thrown at them. So
Mm-hmm.
being engaged in the process is vitally important, especially with our black males, because they think that we are just going to report them. We're just going to turn them in. It's like we're part of that system that's out to get them. So it's a trust issue. You got to think about it. Over 85% of the therapists in the United States are Caucasian. And so, of course, that's going to be a trust
So
factor.
35%?
No, over 84%.
84%.
Over 84% of the psychology workforce in the US are Caucasian. And so
Mm-hmm.
we don't have anybody in the field that looks like us. We don't have anybody in this field. We have some, but it's not many of us. And
Right.
so and that's one of the reasons why we implement this project. We wanted to galvanize not only faith entities, but non-faith entities. We want to expose all of our Black therapists because we have some great African American clinicians in this community. And so, but the more we come together, the bigger impact we can have on the masses. And so I'll say to any Black male, anyone who's hesitating to receive therapeutic services, be engaged, ask questions. Ask questions to your psychologist, like you should be asking questions with your medical doctor. What is the difference between how a Black person metabolizes medicine compared to a Caucasian person? If your doctor, or if they don't know that, I think that's a bigger discussion, right? And so if you're not engaged in that process, you're just going to accept whatever they tell you, right? And if you don't do the research behind that medication, you're just going to accept whatever they tell you. So you have to be engaged in the process, ask questions. And therapy is pretty much relational. Just like you and I, we're talking right now. This is therapeutic for me because
Right.
I feel like this is helping me get the message out, which really helps me stay regulated because I know the need is desperately out is needed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so therapy is just a relationship. Get in there and engage. And if you don't like the fit, if you don't think it's a good fit, if you don't think that they're taking your whole family system in context, if they're not understanding you as a culture, then you have the right to choose. And you have a right to discontinue services as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is important, not only because it's important anyway, but it's important especially because of what's going on right now in the world. There's a lot of stuff that we're seeing on social media and seeing on the news, and then you compound that with your white friends or people asking you questions because either they're skeptical of what's going on or they're just so unsure. So you feel like you have to be able to help to spread this message of our struggle because one of the things I think is right now is in my lifetime it feels like this is the most attention we've ever had from white people to Black issues, and I don't think that I don't think we can afford to let this slip away because even though Black people can do a lot, I don't think we can change the entire system by ourselves. We need allies, we need friends, we need family of other races and ethnicities to assist us with approaching this idea of white supremacy and systemic racism. a lot of this stuff is new terminology for a lot of people because they've just never heard about it. And I think it's important for you because the reason I asked you that last question is there's a stigma. Like if you tell somebody maybe you should go see a therapist, first thing a lot of Black people will say is, "Man, I'm not crazy." They think that therapy is for crazy people. So I just think it's important to get this message out. So I appreciate you joining me and to just kind of help push this message to Black men, Black people, and even others who want to support us and want to understand our plight a little bit better. So I appreciate you joining me today. And is there anything else that you want to plug for Minority Mental Health Project before we end it?
No, just look for our infomercial on social media. We're going to launch that Monday. It's very powerful, and it kind of gives a great overview of what the minority mental health is all about. So www.mmhplou.com. And let me say this too, man. I've only known you for about a year. Have we known each other for about a year? And I'm very.
I don't think it's been that long.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with how you use your position and your platform, man. So kudos to you, man. Keep doing what you're doing to help the cause and use your platform to help the community, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that too. And that's for anybody that doesn't listen to that today or this week. It's Monday, June 8th that he's saying that the information will come out. And can you tell them if they want to find you on Facebook, what they type in? Do you have an Instagram? Do you have Twitter? Just tell everybody how they can keep up with what y'all doing.
Yeah, Facebook, I believe it's at MMHPKY. Twitter is MMHP. It's at MMHP lowercase LOU.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, man. And that's it. We'll wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for listening.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate you, buddy.